Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and today, as the summer winds down and Labor Day is right around the corner, we thought we'd talk about labor and labor unions and the like. Lisa Lemieux is joining us. She is president of the Greater Southeastern Mass Labor Council, amongst other things, but that's what we're going with today here too. As I said, mom, grandma, great-mama, grandma, we got all those too, but this is what we're going to talk about today. So thanks for joining us. It's great having you in.
Thanks for having me.
Labor Day, obviously, end of the summer for a lot of people, although I contend that it's not, but that's a whole other issue. But it's a good time to look at labor and just the workers all around that make such a difference and the like. So I think it's really great to have you in to talk about that. Talk about, I guess, to start here for people who don't know, talk about your organization, the local chapter here. How is it going and what are we doing right now?
Sure. So the Greater Southeastern Massachusetts Labor Council is a branch off the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. So we have several labor councils throughout the state. And ours we're super proud of. We're, at one time was 3 separate labor councils, one for the Cape and Islands, one for Fall River, one for New Bedford. And before my time, it merged to become the Greater Southeastern Mass Labor Council. I like to call us one of the most active labor councils in the state. We have a really large district all the way, everything south of Taunton through the Cape and Islands. But we run a regular annual program like most organizations where we meet monthly with our affiliates, which are different local unions from all different unions in Massachusetts. Some are statewide, some are smaller locals. But we have over 40 different affiliates with over 40,000 members, anywhere from healthcare workers to educators, steel workers, we can go on, firefighters, UFCW, grocery store workers. We have a couple of ATU locals, the bus drivers, and Mass Nurses Association. The list goes on and on of the different workers that we represent. But our job here is really to focus on organizing regionally, because we believe strongly that the issues of workers in southeastern Massachusetts is very different than the issues of workers in Boston or in Worcester or anywhere else in the state. And so in our day-to-day programming, we make sure that we keep up to date with the needs of our local affiliates. If they're having a contract fight, if they're going on strike, we're supporting them. We do a lot of education, in our labor council, which is right here in the city of New Bedford, downtown. It's a resource for our unions. There's bargaining that happens there, trainings that happen there, so typically we meet every single month to do our regular month-to-month business, and then we break for the summer, but we also do a lot of our political work because we're gearing up for the municipal elections or statewide elections in the fall.
I was going to ask too, which is interesting. It's funny when you talk to state reps in here or other folks, they'll say that it's true that in a sense our region has similar needs, but also different needs from other unions. Is that hard from your standpoint? Say you're trying to get legislation passed, or you're trying to do something that benefits here, but you also know you got to get the folks in Western Mass to help you too. Is that a hard sell for folks?
No, I think the one thing that's true about unions is that we don't just fight for ourselves. We represent everybody, whether workers are unionized or non-unionized. So most of our legislation is statewide legislation. You look at things like the minimum wage bill. That, by and large, did not affect union workers. It helped to bring the floor up for all other workers. You look at the Fair Share Amendment, this benefited everybody, not just union workers. It really is a pet peeve of mine that, which is why I'm so passionate about organizing regionally, is that, to me, a nurse is a nurse is a nurse.
Right.
It really aggravates me that we will lose talented nurses to go to work in Boston just to make more money. That's just not the way it should be. They should be able to make the same amount of money in this ER as they do in the Boston ER, or if they're a nurse on the floor, or they're a CNA or a housekeeper, or anybody that works in our hospitals. The idea that we're okay with the fact that these workers are now going to increase their workday, sometimes by an additional 4 hours when you take that commute into account, to drive 4 hours to then go do an 8, 10, 12-hour day.
Right.
What are we asking for when we allow things like that to happen? Never mind the other side of if they have children right? Who are they being left with? Who's educating them? Who's raising them? Who's feeding them? Who's with them while these parents are out working those extended days because they got to go somewhere further to make more money?
It's funny, you kind of sound like when you're talking to the state reps around here and whatever, when you're talking about the budget, they're always sort of, I don't want to say battling's not the right word, but they're always trying to debate the folks because Boston always seems to get, Boston's the hub and it gets the money, or the greater Boston area, and you're always trying to make the case that, hey, Southeastern Mass or Western Mass or the North Shore is every bit as important to the economy of the state as greater Boston is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a time where we could say that the cost of living was definitely greater in Boston than it was here, and people would make an argument that that's why workers in Boston needed to be able to make more money. But as we've seen the cost of living go up in Southeastern Massachusetts, it's just not true anymore. Like it costs so much money for people to live here in Southeastern Massachusetts, and we have many people who are working and living in poverty because their wages haven't kept up with the cost of living. So it's so important for us that workers come together to fight for what's right, that workers get their piece of the pie, make a living wage so that we can have a good economy here in Southeastern Massachusetts. We know that when our economy was the best was when union numbers were the highest, right? Unions are what brought us the middle class, and unions are what's going to bring back that middle class.
Talk to me, and it's a good segue right now, because where you've been involved a long time, and this is sort of a generic question, but where do unions stand right now? I guess as you look at statewide and nationally, where do they stand right now?
I'm happy to say that we have the most worker support that we've had in my time in the labor movement, right? I moved here in 1989, and my first job in the union was at AT&T in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. And we had a lot of support for workers at AT&T, as that business had been here and left before. And I learned a lot about solidarity and unity because people outside of our workplace came to support us in the jobs that we had there at AT&T. But, what I'm most proud of, I think, since the pandemic, is that people really realized what was the most important, what jobs really mattered, what people came to terms with the fact that our infrastructure that we talked about being our number one priority, that infrastructure actually equals the people doing the work. Union members came out, they worked through the entire pandemic, whether they were supported by our federal government or state government, they worked every day. We made sure our grocery store stayed open. We made sure our hospitals stayed open. People got the care that they needed. And, we weren't first in line for vaccinations, although we should have been. I felt like we kind of got left behind on that one. But I think the pandemic really showed how we really need to invest in our workers, because our workers is what keeps our country, moving in the right direction.
Do you have an idea as to when unions were at their largest population-wise? I mean, are we down a lot compared to at its peak?
Well, we're down a lot, right? And its peak was, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? And then we continued to go down and continued to go down. I think even prior to the pandemic, we started ooching up again, and some were industry specific. But today, we see that there's actual growth, right? There is actual organizing going on, and we're super proud about that. I mean, you look at just the cannabis industry here in Southeastern Massachusetts, right? We've got some organized workers. The gig economy, right, is being forced to organize. When we think about people at Starbucks, we think of people at Trader Joe's, you think about our Uber drivers, right? These are all workers, they are workers. And we have people and businesses who are trying to change laws in our country that allow them to be treated not as workers. And that's really important to us when we talk about legislation, not just statewide, but across this country. Our labor movement worked hard to put laws in place that protected workers. And, those laws have been under attack for a very long time. And we need to make sure, one of our problems here in Southeastern Massachusetts people not coming out to vote. When people don't show up and vote, bad things happen.
And
bad laws get put into
that's everywhere.
place. That's everywhere.
I mean,
but it's definitely a problem here, and that's something that we've been working hard to make sure that we educate all people, but including workers, right? We need to make sure that all workers are registered to vote, that all workers are registering, and that many of our workers are actually, many of our union members are running for office.
let me ask you two things. One, how do you, because obviously, and you make the point, I mean, the city, state, just turnout is not very good for them. And there's a lot of workers that aren't voting. How do you, not you specifically, how does the union convince people you need to vote? No matter who you're supporting, you need to get out there.
Yeah, we try really hard not to tell people who to vote for. We try to focus on voter education. So, we find out who's running and we share that information. These are the candidates. These are the people you have to pick from. Obviously, we do a lot to do worker education and try to, encourage union members to run for office. But when we don't have that, we can only pick from who's running. And so, like this year, we're doing a big voter registration drive because we know that we have union members who aren't registered to vote. So we're doing, we're going to focus a lot of our energy on voter registration, talking to the youth, right? We get out and do voter registration drives at every event that we possibly can, convincing people to register to vote as early as possible. And then we do, if and when we make endorsements, which, our members vote on, then we will participate in that process, the door-to-door mailers, and educational pieces on the people that we endorse.
I'm curious as to what you think is the biggest challenge as far as getting people into the union. Is it hard for, do young people want to be part of the union? Do you have to convince them? I know that I was talking to the personnel director, and, in general, she's saying the young people just want the money. They're not looking for pensions and everything. They want the salary right now. And I'm curious because you've done this a long time now. Are you seeing, is there a generational issue when it comes to unions and the issues that you're talking about and so passionate about? Yeah,
I mean, we do, we're really proud of the scholarship program that we have at the Greater Southeastern Mass Labor Council. My predecessor, Cynthia Rodericks, began our scholarship program, and we give out 3 scholarships originally, one for Cape and Islands, one for Fall River, one for New Bedford, and now we've added one for the former director of the Labor Ed Center, Jose Solet, who passed away. We started a scholarship for him, and then we have a scholarship for Evelyn Moniz, who was a longtime president in the Textile Workers Union in Fall River. And one of the requirements of that scholarship is that you interview a family member who was in the union and tell that story and how your family benefited from that family member being in the union. We have applicants who are struggling to fill that component of our scholarship application because fewer and fewer people have family members who are in the union. And so a lot of our folks are doing, basically history reports on the labor movement.
Right.
And so, I do think that, we all know about Janus that made our public sector workers right to work in Massachusetts and across the country. And people predicted that we would lose members when Janus passed through. And in fact, it didn't. We actually gained members. People, do people not want to pay dues? Yes. Because they're struggling to live, not because they don't support the union or the things that their unions are fighting for. Right? It all comes down to the penny and the dollar that they're spending to be a member of the union. But by and large, we have more people joining the union. We have more industries that are unionizing, and so I do think, in addition to worker support, there is more support for unions than there was 20 years ago.
I was going to say, from your standpoint, what have you noticed change-wise from 1989, when you first started, to 2003? What are some of the changes you're seeing right now, just as far as what people feel and think about unions, who are part of the union?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people thought that we were going to have these rights and benefits forever, right? Pensions, a living wage, good benefits, and a lot of our contracts, you cannot win everything at the bargaining table, and
negotiations.
And many things that we have won, businesses are coming after, right? I think health insurance is a problem in our country. It doesn't matter what industry it is.
Yeah.
And I think every employer would love to be able to afford to provide good health insurance to all their workers, but it's unaffordable, it's unattainable. And I don't think that that's one of the things that we should have to bargain over, right? Education and health insurance are things that people should have. In this country, we are the richest country. Every person in this world should have access to good health insurance and good education for free.
And it's funny, you talk to, at least me, small business owners, and they're frustrated with health insurance
Absolutely.
because they can't afford to provide the health insurance, and the health insurance they do provide is not up to what they would like to provide.
Right.
And it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's not really the business owner's fault or the employee's fault. It's just, as you said, it's a bigger issue of health insurance cost.
Yeah, I do think that there's a big difference between, the folks who are college bound and who have a career path, and those who are not college bound, right? And neither, both are good options, and we encourage people to do the research and do what they think is best for them. But one of the things that we're most proud about is our building trades and the apprenticeship programs that we have. Building Pathways South here in New England, in Southeastern Mass, where we work to get people of color and women into the building trades. Because in the building trades, unlike colleges, we actually help to train workers, on a skill, and they get paid while they're learning, right? To earn while you learn is so important to us. And when they're done with that apprenticeship program, to know that they're going to be on the job making a living wage with good benefits, which is very different than our college-bound kids who work very hard and pay a lot of money, go to college to get those degrees, and then walk out with a huge amount of debt, the majority, and then barely make a living wage when they come out to be able to afford to live and pay those loans. And so I think that there are lots of people who believe in the concept of a union, but how do you bridge that gap from getting out of high school, going to school, and getting a job where there is a union or fighting to get the union there, which I think is hard, it's overwhelming for a lot of people. I'm proud to say that Planned Parenthood in Massachusetts, right, organized, we just settled their first contract. SEIU, 1199 SEIU just settled their first contract with Planned Parenthood. Those are the things that, and it's not about, right, having a union in every workplace, but giving workers the voice, the right to sit at the table, to be part of the decision making, and have a say in what's needed in their workplace to make things better. We spend so much time working that the least that we can do is do our best to work collaboratively to make it the best experience for the time that people are at work, right? And then still value the time that people have left outside of work to go spend it doing the things that they want to do or being with the people they love.
Lisa Lemieux is our guest. We're talking about labor and unions as the summer winds down. She is the president of the Greater Southeastern Mass Labor Council. You touched on the the skilled workers and stuff like that. So many people are looking for those workers right now. I mean, you see electricians, plumbers, carpenters. Why do you think right now that there's such a, well, I know why there's a need, because people want to do this stuff, but why isn't there enough of those workers right now? Mechanics my mechanic keeps telling me I need people.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that when we look at, generations of people, right? I come from a generation where we're it's a hardworking generation. And I look at all my children who are also very hardworking kids. My youngest is 28 years old. All four of my children are hardworking people. But as I see the kids coming up after that generation, people value themselves more than I felt like my generation did, right? If I'm going to work that hard, I should get paid a living wage. And I think that's the one thing that the pandemic showed, is that a lot of people learned how to work from home and valued the time that they had at home. Like, people actually missed being at home with their family or doing things that they enjoyed. And so if I'm going to go out and work and I'm going to work hard, you got to pay me well. And that's the thing that I find different about our generations coming up now. People don't want some of these kind of grunt jobs, even though many of them do pay a living wage. And I think part of our problem is, it's a good problem, right? Our unemployment is the lowest it's been in a very long time.
And yet job openings are still, and there was always talk that it was going to end and blah, blah, whatever. And there's still a demand for jobs right now.
Yeah.
For people to fill jobs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as we continue, right? There were many jobs of the past that, as a union, as a labor movement, we've tried to do our part to educate union members about some jobs really weren't good jobs. And we need our workers to transition into these newer, better jobs that are going to help, keep our country moving in the right direction. And so, green jobs, as we look at the wind industry here, right, they're jobs that didn't exist that we're now creating, hoping that we create, a better place for people to live for a very long time. And that's one of the things that inspires me. It's not so much about me, but it's about my children and my grandchildren, that we're leaving this world in a better place, and I'm not sure that I'm going to accomplish that.
It's interesting too, because you touched on jobs changing, for example, and I go back to my mechanic, cars are changing, and you don't need so much as a mechanic as a tech person, because cars are more computerized. They're not the gas-powered engines. They still are in some cases, but a lot more now are computer-oriented, and that's where the skill set's missing. They don't have the people that can do that.
Right.
So you're right. Times have changed, and you still need people to do this stuff.
Yeah, and it goes back to the math and sciences, right? And the importance of folks being in school and learning those basics is so important, because that's what's going to, help get people ready to be able to continue their education out of high school and be able to, and some of these jobs that are coming up today don't require you to go on beyond high school. You can graduate with a high school diploma, and get into some of these jobs that are coming up. And then there are other ones that are going to require a whole lot more education. But, one of the things that we've been working on, right, is the Thrive Act to stop, the MCAS testing. High stakes testing is something that's preventing a lot of our kids from graduating from high school, even though they have the knowledge and the skills, but they're just bad testers. Right? And so, it is a combination of things that we're working on to continue to move in the right direction and, making sure that we have jobs that are living wage jobs where people can make a living and survive in our community.
One of the topics I know that you're focused on, which doesn't it does have something to do with labor, but doesn't, childcare.
Yeah.
Right now, child care facilities, because of the pandemic, closed. They didn't reopen. There's a lack of child care workers. It's a double-edged sword. Obviously, is from your standpoint, we need workers, but you also need the workers so other people can work too and help move things forward. What do you look at, and obviously as a mother and a grandmother, that's such a huge issue. What are you looking at right now as far as things to try to help that issue get better?
Well, we need more child care facilities. So we need to be able to, manage the regulations around daycares so that it's attainable for people. And we also need workers in those industries to make a living wage, right? If I'm going to go work at a daycare, more than 40 hours a week, I need to be able to make a living wage when I walk out of there.
And it's funny, just on the aside, I heard over the weekend the average cost is $10,000 for a family a year for daycare.
Right. So you think of the worker that's, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be on the road at 4 o'clock to get to that job site or to get to that hospital, right? We have, hospital workers who start at 6 a.m. in the morning, sometimes earlier than that. Where do you take your kid to at 5 o'clock in the morning so that you can be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning? That's a problem, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, right? We have just as many moms, just as many dads looking for daycare as we do moms who are looking for daycare.
But the problem is people starting daycares too. I mean, there's just not enough
daycares,
people doing it.
Yep.
And the pandemic really took a chunk of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when union halls used to have daycare.
Really?
But then it became so expensive, the liability, the insurance, and so, we just have to work together, right? This is one of those examples where there are people who want to go into businesses and own daycares, and we need to help facilitate that process.
We got about 3 minutes left, so this conversation has flown by, but I want to make sure people have the opportunity, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to know more about that, tell us a little bit about your websites. There's a good website out there for people to do, so there's a lot of information. Talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so we're located downtown at 560 Pleasant Street, right downtown, and we have our website, which I think has actually been having some technical problems that we're trying to get corrected. But if you just Google Greater Southeastern Mass Labor Council, it will come up. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page where we post day-to-day stuff. Any rallies or information on local unions that are happening is there. We are a part-time organization, or I should say a volunteer organization. I'm an elected, unpaid officer. Our entire board are volunteers. A lot of them are rank and file workers from the unions of our affiliates. Some of them are staff members, like myself. I'm a staffer and organizer for the Mass Teachers Association. So we communicate a lot by email and by phone, but we do have our monthly meetings. They're open meetings. People can come to them. We host an annual holiday party at the end of every year to break bread together and celebrate our successes. Right now, we're going to be gearing up for the municipal elections, and so I'm proud that many people in our community just come to our office because they want to work for the elections. Like, they don't even know, what we're. But if we've come, people have gotten to know us that if you want to work for the elections, go down to the Labor Council because we're going to be involved in those elections no matter what's going on.
And obviously, right now with the city's municipal election coming up in November as well, the general election, you're, as you said right at the top of the show, you're going to be actively involved trying to get people to vote.
Yep,
register
absolutely.
To vote.
Yep, we're interviewing all the candidates that submitted their papers who got certified. They'll be filling out our municipal labor survey that we provided. We ask them all the questions about the things that are important to them, important to us, and what their positions are on them. And then sometimes we do further interviews, and then we may or may not make an endorsement depending on how our member votes. But we encourage people, we put a lot of that stuff on our storefront window so people can read it as they walk by.
It has been a very fast-moving conversation. I appreciate you coming in.
You're
This has
welcome.
been great.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation with Lisa Lemieux, our guest. I thank her for coming in. Thank you for watching, and we will talk to you again soon.